What if the girl you mocked at the office coffee machine was born to own the building? What if the intern in cheap shoes and a borrowed blazer was actually the sister of the CEO everyone feared? This isn't just a story about lost family. It's about power stolen, identity buried, and a quiet storm that returns. Not to beg, but to reign. She was raised as a mistake. But what happens when the world finds out she was the heir all along? The concrete was cold beneath her back, and the ceiling above her was so low that when she sat up too fast, she'd hit her head again. But Ava no longer flinched. The pain was familiar, like the creak of the floorboards above or the sound of footsteps that always brought orders, never kindness. Her room, if it could be called that, wasn't much more than a basement corner, fenced in by stacks of old furniture, broken appliances, and boxes no one cared to unpack. A thin mattress lay on the floor beside a leaking pipe that dripped rhythmically into a bucket. The only light came from a single dangling bulb that flickered when it rained. She had lived here for over 10 years, ever since the Whitmores had taken her in after her foster home mysteriously shut down. Taken her in sounded noble, but the truth was uglier. She was the unpaid maid, the invisible girl. Mrs. Whitmore, a heavy-set woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, made sure she earned her keep. Dishes by 5, laundry by 6, floors by 7, and God help her if she missed a spot. Emily, the Whitmore's daughter, was the same age as Ava, but acted like royalty. She paraded through the house in designer heels, posting fake tears on social media about how hard it was being an only child, while Ava scrubbed her bathroom floor with a toothbrush. Every day Ava moved like a ghost, silent, careful, unseen. She didn't complain. What would be the point? She had tried once, years ago, to speak to a teacher about the bruises and the hunger. A week later, Mrs. Whitmore withdrew her from school, claiming Ava needed time to mature. That time had turned into 3 years of being locked away from the world, watching the days pass through a small square window near the ceiling. She wasn't allowed to make phone calls. She didn't even own a phone. And yet, she dreamed. Every night she clutched a small velvet pouch tied around her neck, a single heart-shaped locket inside, worn with age. It was the only thing she had from before. Inside it, a name barely visible, A.V. The Whitmores said it stood for Ava. They said her real parents were probably addicts or deadbeats. But she didn't believe them. The way Mrs. Whitmore looked at that necklace, like it was a secret she wished had stayed buried, told her there was more. She just didn't know what. That morning, the routine was the same. Wake up before dawn, make breakfast, she wouldn't be allowed to eat, clean up the plates she hadn't used. But something changed when the mail slipped through the door. She had just bent down to pick it up when she saw her name, Ava Whitmore, printed neatly on a thick cream-colored envelope. Her heart raced. She tore it open in the corner of the kitchen, eyes scanning the elegant serif font. You have been shortlisted for the internship program at Vaughn Global Enterprises. Final interviews will be held this Friday at our headquarters. Congratulations. She didn't scream, she didn't jump. She just stood there, frozen, as if the world had suddenly remembered she existed. But the paper never made it to her room. Mrs. Whitmore had walked in seconds later and ripped it from her hands. "What is this?" Ava whispered. "It's mine. It came with my name." "That's not your name," the woman hissed. "You don't need this garbage. You're not going anywhere." And then, right in front of her, the letter was torn in half and tossed into the trash. That night, Ava stared at the ceiling and made a decision. She had spent too long surviving in someone else's prison. If the world had finally cracked the door open, even just a little, she would crawl through, even if she had to bleed doing it. Vaughn Global wasn't just a company. It was her one and only escape, and she would take it, even if it meant walking barefoot through fire. She waited until 3:15 a.m., the exact time Mrs. Whitmore took her sleeping pills, and Emily was passed out with her phone still buzzing from midnight selfies. Ava had timed it for months. That night, she moved like smoke through the dark hallways, slipped into the kitchen, and fished through the trash bin with trembling hands. The envelope was still there, crumpled but intact. She smoothed the torn pieces of the letter on the counter, taping them back together with strips of clear packaging tape. She read the words again, this time aloud. Final interviews, Vaughn Global, this Friday. 3 days, that's all she had. She stole glances in the mirror the next morning. Her best blouse had a coffee stain. Her shoes were 2 sizes too big, but her eyes Her eyes were steady now. On Friday morning, she stood outside the glistening tower of Vaughn Global Enterprises in a faded navy skirt and oversized coat. The glass stretched toward the sky like ambition made physical, and for a moment, she hesitated. The security guard looked her up and down, unimpressed. "Delivery are in the back," he muttered. "I'm here for an interview," she said quietly, holding out the taped-up letter. He scoffed, but buzzed her in. The marble lobby was colder than she expected, sleek, unwelcoming. The receptionist barely looked up. "Name?" "Ava Whitmore," she said. The woman typed, frowned, then motioned toward the elevator. 22nd floor, be quick." Upstairs, the waiting room was a war zone of privilege. Girls with pressed blazers, designer heels, and resumes printed on parchment sat with legs crossed and noses higher. They turned to her like she was a stain on the chair. One girl actually scooted further down the couch. Ava didn't flinch. She sat on the edge of the seat and folded her hands. She had nothing but her name, and even that had been borrowed. When her name was finally called, she entered a sleek glass conference room with 5 judges, each sharper than the next. She answered questions with quiet confidence, relying on instinct and the countless books she'd read secretly at night. One of the panelists, a middle-aged man with silver hair and distant eyes, asked her the final question. "Why should we choose you, Miss Whitmore, over candidates with better education and experience?" She hesitated, then looked him straight in the eye. "Because I've lived a life where nothing was handed to me. I've cleaned bathrooms instead of attending prom. I've fought for every minute of peace, and I'm not here to compete with their privilege. I'm here because I know what it means to work harder than I'm supposed to, in places I was never meant to be." The panel fell silent. From behind the mirrored glass, unseen to Ava, another figure was watching. A tall man in a charcoal suit with cold eyes and a barely visible scar near his left temple. Adrian Vaughn, CEO, Billionaire. He hadn't planned to observe the interviews, but a certain phrase caught his attention as he passed the observation room. "I've lived a life where nothing was handed to me." It was something his sister had once said when they were children, a sister who vanished 17 years ago in a storm of chaos and betrayal. He leaned forward as she spoke, noting the way her hands fidgeted when she thought no one noticed. The shape of her face. The chain around her neck was barely hidden under her blouse, and something inside him. A memory, a whisper, a forgotten thread, tightened without warning. After she left the room, one of the judges leaned toward the microphone. "Well, that one's out. Not polished enough." But before he could press delete, Adrian's voice crackled through the speaker. "Put her through to phase 2. No one questioned him. No one ever did. And in the elevator ride down, as Ava stared at her reflection, she didn't know she had just been noticed by the one man whose past was about to collide headfirst with hers. The next Monday, Ava returned to Vaughn Global for phase 2. This time, the security guard didn't sneer. He offered a clipped nod, almost like respect. She wore the same skirt, pressed as carefully as she could with a hot water bottle. Her shoes were still too big, but she walked taller now, her chin a fraction higher. She was assigned to a team for a time challenge. Develop a strategy to pitch a fake product to the executive board. Her teammates, Marla, Jade, and Tiff, were all fashion degree holders who rolled their eyes the second she spoke. "Let's not waste time with basement ideas," Jade snorted after Ava suggested a pricing structure. Ava bit her tongue and stayed silent. Instead of fighting, she observed, she watched them dismiss key trends, ignore consumer behavior, and build a hollow presentation around buzzwords. The night before the pitch, they left her alone to clean up slides. Ava didn't just fix their slides, she rebuilt the entire thing, and the next morning, she was the one who stepped up to present. At first, the judges were puzzled, then curious, then impressed. But only one person watched her with absolute stillness. Adrian Vaughn, seated in the shadows near the back, his eyes narrowing at every word she said. She spoke with neither flair nor fear, only clarity, and that locket still peeked from under her blouse like a whisper begging to be heard. After the pitch, while her teammates rushed to celebrate, Ava stayed behind to help reset the chairs. She knelt to pick up a dropped pen when a small voice caught her ear. "Excuse me, miss, I'm lost." She turned to find a little boy, maybe 5 years old, clutching a toy dinosaur. He'd wandered from the daycare center on the floor below. Ava didn't hesitate. She knelt down, met his eyes, and gently said, Let's get you back to your grown-ups." As she walked him to the elevator, she asked him questions, made him laugh, and even fixed his shoelace. None of this was part of the test, but what she didn't know was that every inch of the hallway had surveillance. And Adrian was watching the footage from his office, replaying it 3 times. Not because of the boy, but because when Ava crouched down to tie the child's shoe, her locket slipped from under her blouse, catching the light just enough to show the initials engraved on the heart, AV. His breath caught. He walked over to his safe and unlocked a tiny velvet box buried beneath old files and war-torn memories. Inside, protected like a wound, was a broken half of a matching necklace, its jagged edge proof of something long lost. It was all coming back. The storm, the fire, the screams, the nurse's blood-streaked uniform, and the tiny hand that clutched his as men burst into the house, tearing them apart. "Stay with me," he had cried. "Don't let go." But she had, not by choice, by force. Adrian sat down slowly, heart pounding like thunder in a steel vault. That girl, Ava, couldn't just be a coincidence. That necklace wasn't mass-produced. It was custom-made. For Amelia Vaughn, his sister, lost 17 years ago, presumed dead. But she was alive, in his building, wearing someone else's name. The file he requested arrived before sundown. It wasn't much. A resume typed in shaky font, a high school equivalency certificate dated 2 years late, and no official records before age 6. Legal guardian listed as Sharon Whitmore, family friend. Adrian sat alone in his glass office, the city stretching behind him in gold and steel. His fingers curled into fists. It didn't add up. The girl had no real past, no medical records before 2007, no photos from childhood. And yet, that necklace? He pulled the velvet box back out and set it beside the open file. The 2 halves didn't just look similar. They matched. A perfect jagged puzzle, as if fate itself had been waiting for them to reunite. Adrian had once held that piece in his palm as a boy and whispered prayers into it when the world forgot what was taken from him. Amelia had been 3 years old when she disappeared, torn from their estate during a fire set by men hired by his uncle in a failed inheritance grab. Their parents had died in the fire. Adrian had survived. Amelia had vanished. For years he'd hired detectives, searched orphanages, and chased rumors, until silence settled over everything and grief hardened into logic. "She's gone," they told him. "Move on." But he never did. He picked up the phone. "Carson," he said to his head of security, "I want a quiet DNA test. I need a strand of hair, anything. Pull her interview room footage, trash bins, and cafeteria tray. Discreetly, don't spook her, no questions." Carson didn't ask. Orders like this weren't rare, just never this personal. Meanwhile, Ava returned home exhausted, her name still not called, no offer yet made. The Whitmores didn't ask how it went. They assumed she'd failed. At dinner, Emily mocked her. "Bet they asked you to sweep the floor. That's more your speed." Sharon didn't even look up from her wine glass. "You should have stayed home. You're embarrassing," she muttered. Ava said nothing. Her mind was still replaying the presentation, the faces, the faint feeling that someone had been watching her more closely than the others, not with pity, with something sharper. The next day she returned to Vaughn Global for a final round of interviews. She sat in the lobby, waiting, when a woman in a white coat approached her. "Hi, I'm from the wellness office. Someone reported that you fainted last week during testing. We just need a quick check-in." Ava blinked. "I don't remember fainting." The woman smiled. "Probably just stress, just routine." She followed, unaware of the sample quietly taken from the comb used to straighten her hair during the fake checkup. 3 days later, Adrian stood alone in the conference room as Carson slid the envelope across the table. He opened it with fingers that weren't trembling, but felt like they should. His eyes scanned the first line. 99.98% match. Subject A, Ava Whitmore, is the biological sibling of Subject B, Adrian Vaughn. Silence pressed down like gravity. His knees didn't buckle, but something in his chest cracked. "She's Amelia," he said softly, as if saying it aloud would make it real. Carson whispered, "What now?" Adrian turned, eyes glassy but resolute. "Now, we bring her home." But he hesitated. He couldn't just walk in and claim her. After all these years, she was someone else now. someone who had survived in the dark while he had risen to power under spotlights. She might not trust him, she might not even want him, and worst of all, she might not believe him. So he'd need to earn her trust, carefully, quietly, until the moment was right. And the sister he'd lost could finally choose to come back. The day the envelope arrived at the Whitmore house, Sharon panicked. It wasn't addressed to her, but she recognized the insignia, Vaughn Global. Her hands trembled as she slid it open before Ava could see it. Inside was a simple notice. Dear Miss Whitmore, we are pleased to inform you that you have been shortlisted for our mentorship program, one of the most selective development tracks in our company. It meant Ava wasn't just in, she was chosen. Sharon's breath caught. It was happening. The walls were closing in. The past she'd paid to silence was clawing its way back. That night, Sharon called someone she hadn't spoken to in 17 years. A man with a rasp in his voice and poison in his soul. I told you this day would come, he growled through the receiver. You were paid to disappear with the girl. Sharon's voice cracked. I didn't think they'd find her. I changed her name, burned every paper. But you kept the necklace, he hissed. You kept the proof. You thought wrong, he snapped. Do you want to lose everything? That girl steps foot in their world and you're done. Do something. She hung up before her heart exploded. For years, she'd buried Ava under chores, denial, and shame, hoping the girl would break and run off before anyone came looking. But Ava hadn't broken. She'd gotten stronger, smarter, beautiful even, just like her real mother. And now the eyes of a billion-dollar empire were turning toward the house she'd used to hide a stolen child. The next morning, Sharon locked the front door before Ava could leave. Where are you going? She asked coldly. They called me back, Ava said, surprised by the sudden interrogation. I got into their mentorship program. Sharon's face twisted. You're not going. They probably got the wrong girl. You'll embarrass yourself. And us. Ava frowned. You never cared about us. Why now? Because, Sharon snapped, you're not like them. You're not one of them. You belong here. In a basement? Ava said softly. Is that all I'll ever be to you? That night, Sharon drank herself into silence. Emily, sensing something was wrong, rifled through her mother's drawer and found the torn invitation, the empty envelope, and an old photograph folded behind a check stub. It was a grainy picture of a woman holding a toddler, Ava, next to a luxurious mansion. On the back, in fading ink, were the words, "For delivery, cash confirmed, AV Estate, Sept 2007. Emily's eyes widened. What the hell? She muttered. She stormed into Ava's room, threw the photo at her. What is this? Why is my mom hiding your baby pics with rich people? Ava stared at it, numb. It was her. The woman holding her wasn't Sharon, and behind them stood a gate, etched faintly with the name Vaughn. Give that back, Sharon barked, appearing at the door, face pale. You knew, Ava whispered. All these years. You knew I wasn't yours. I saved you, Sharon screamed. I fed you, clothed you, while the world left you to rot. Ava rose, calm but shaking. You didn't save me, you hid me, you used me, and now you're scared, because you know I don't belong here. Sharon lunged to slap her, but Ava stepped back. Don't touch me, not again, I'm leaving. You leave this house, you leave everything. There's nothing here to leave, Ava said, her voice like a blade. As she walked away, the front door closing behind her felt more like the ending of a prison sentence than a rebellion. She held the photo in her pocket, her name a lie on every form she'd ever filled. But that night, under the streetlights of the city she thought she'd never be a part of, Ava made herself a promise. She would find out who she really was, even if it destroyed everything she thought she knew. Adrian didn't sleep that night. The report lay open on his desk, blunt and clinical. Yet it shook the foundation of his world. Ava Whitmore. No, Ava Vaughn was his sister. The test was beyond dispute. He stared at her photo, frozen mid-step during her presentation, the necklace visible like a forgotten scar. Memories flooded back. Amelia giggling behind velvet curtains, her tiny hand gripping his when thunder roared, her whispered promise. You'll never lose me. But he had. Until now. Adrian called his assistant at 6 a.m., voice sharp. I want Ava brought to my office by 10, privately. No press, no board members. Yes, sir, the assistant answered. But by 9:45, she was back at his door, nervous. "Sir, we can't find her." "What do you mean?" "She didn't show up today. HR said she withdrew her application last night. No explanation, no response to emails." Adrian's heart dropped. He moved to his computer and searched the surveillance logs, but her company badge hadn't been scanned since yesterday morning. He called Carson, breathless. "Find her, whatever it takes." Elsewhere, Ava was already gone. She had no plan, only the photo in her pocket and a city full of questions. She'd spent the night in a 24-hour diner, sipping stale coffee, staring at the woman in the picture who might be her real mother. The word Vaughn burned into the image behind them now haunted her thoughts. That wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. Her fingers traced the edge of the necklace, heart racing. She took the subway to the city archive library, and by mid-morning, she had uncovered a headline that made her breath stop. Tragedy at Vaughn Estate. Fire claims billionaire parents. Daughter missing. The article was old, water-stained, but the photo next to it was clearer than she expected. Adrian Vaughn, 10 years old, in a hospital gown, clinging to the half-burnt edge of a blanket. Beside him was a toddler, her. The caption read, "Amelia Vaughn, presumed dead." She dropped the paper. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't just a cruel prank. Sharon had hidden her, stolen her name, fed her lies for 17 years. Ava staggered outside, overwhelmed. Just then her phone rang. An unknown number. "Ava?" a man's voice asked. "This is Adrian Vaughn." Silence. Her throat locked. "Please," he said gently. "Don't hang up. I need to see you." She didn't speak. "You have questions, I have answers, but more than that, I have a brother-shaped hole in my life that only one person ever fit. And it's you." She hung up. She wasn't ready, but Adrian didn't stop. Over the next 2 days, flowers arrived at the diner she'd listed on her resume. So did a new phone, delivered in a black velvet box, preloaded with one message: "Whenever you're ready to come home, I'll be waiting." That night, Ava lay in a cheap motel bed, staring at the ceiling. She was nobody yesterday. Now she was everything someone had spent half his life looking for. She clutched her necklace tightly and whispered for the first time in years, "Who am I if I wasn't what they told me?" The answer, somewhere between pain and truth, was waiting. And soon, the whole world would know it. The private restaurant on the rooftop of Vaughn Tower was closed that evening. No staff, no candles. Only the city lights blinked far below, and the quiet hum of wind against glass. Adrian waited by the window, hands folded, wearing no tie, no mask of corporate power. Just a man, exposed and waiting. The elevator dinged at exactly 7 p.m. And when Ava stepped out, her eyes wide and unreadable, he felt something in his chest lock and shatter all at once. She looked different. Not because of her clothes. They were still simple, the same worn shoes. But because now she carried knowledge in her spine. She knew. "Hi," she said simply. He nodded. "Hi." Silence stretched between them, like the 17 years they had lost. "I didn't come for answers," she began, voice flat. "I came to hear why no one ever came looking." Adrian's throat tightened. I did. For years. But you vanished. The fire, the nurse who took you, they all disappeared. And then the world told me to bury you." Ava didn't blink. "And you did?" "No," he said quickly. "I never stopped, but no one believed me. They said grief had made me delusional. They shut down every lead. I was a 10-year-old boy with a scar and a nightmare, and no proof." He reached into his pocket and slid a locket across the table. It was identical to hers, except broken. "I've carried this every day, hoping the other half still existed, that you still existed." Ava's fingers hovered over the silver heart, her face unreadable. "I found this in my things when I was 5. Sharon never let me ask where it came from. I just knew it was mine." "It was," he said gently. "They were made together, for you and me." She sat down slowly, her voice low. "So what now? You tell the world I'm your long-lost sister? Take me back to some mansion? Parade me through interviews?" "No," Adrian said firmly. "None of that. I just want to know you, as you are. No cameras, no headlines, just us." She looked away, then back, eyes shimmering. "I don't know how to be her. Amelia Vaughn. That girl died when someone sold her for money. Adrian's jaw clenched. Then be Ava. Be whoever you fought to become. I just want you in my life. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't trust easily. I wouldn't either, he whispered. But you don't have to jump. Just step, one at a time. She nodded slowly. Then something broke in her. Something hardened. And she stood. There's something else. You need to know. She pulled the photo from her coat and slid it across to him. Sharon didn't raise me out of pity. She was paid. Someone wanted me gone. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Who? I don't know yet, but someone tied to our family, our estate. The photo had banknotes, names. It wasn't random. He picked up the photo, his expression darkening. Then we're not just reconnecting a family. We're unearthing a betrayal. And in that moment, under no lights but the truth, two siblings broken by time made a silent vow. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Adrian didn't sleep that night. He stayed up reviewing every name linked to the estate back in 2007, rereading every old document, every suspicious transaction, and every family report his lawyers had ever quietly compiled. One name kept reappearing: Uncle Leonard Vaughn. A charming man in public, a constant presence during the Vaughn charity galas, and executor of their estate when their parents died. The man who had been closest to the fire, both literally and figuratively. Adrian remembered being told Leonard had arrived minutes after the blaze, finding Adrian barely conscious, and declaring little Amelia gone. No body was ever recovered. Leonard had insisted on a swift funeral, quick legal transfer, and within months he was overseeing everything Vaughn until Adrian came of age. It had never made sense, but Adrian was 10, grieving, and nobody questioned Leonard Vaughn until now. By mid-morning, Adrian had summoned Ava back to the tower. This time, he didn't meet her in a polished boardroom or a rooftop restaurant. He took her to a private family library sealed behind a fingerprint lock, one she had never seen. Inside were dusty ledgers, portraits, and a small glass cabinet that held their parents' watches and cufflinks. Ava moved silently, touching nothing. "This was your room once," Adrian said quietly. "Before everything? You used to sit in that corner and read fairy tales. Mom always said you believed the smallest girl could change the biggest kingdom." Ava turned, her voice low. "That girl disappeared the night someone wanted her gone." Adrian nodded, then handed her a manila folder. "Read this." Inside were transfers, estate logs, and a signed payment. $200,000 wired from a Vaughn family account to a woman named Sharon Whitmore. The reason listed: private domestic arrangement. The date: 3 days after the fire. Ava's breath caught. "He paid her to take me?" Adrian's eyes darkened. "Not just take you, erase you." "Why?" she whispered. "Because you were a threat. You and I were the sole heirs. But if you vanished, he could claim half until I turned 18, then quietly stay in power. If you had been declared alive, everything would have changed." Ava's knees gave slightly, but she stayed standing. "He made me a ghost." Just then, the door creaked open. Carson stepped in, jaw tense. "Sir, Leonard Vaughn just arrived downstairs. He says he's here to check in on the family business." Adrian didn't hesitate. "Send him up, but leave us alone." Ava turned sharply. "What are you doing?" Adrian's voice was ice. "Ending this." When Leonard entered, he smiled until he saw Ava. His steps faltered. "Well, I'll be damned." Ava stared at him, her body taut with rage. "You remember me?" He tilted his head. "Hard to forget what you paid to erase." He chuckled softly, stepping forward. "You were supposed to stay buried." "Why?" she demanded. "Why me?" "Because you were easy," Leonard hissed. "Just a toddler. No one would miss a girl in a fire. Everyone mourned and moved on. Your brother was too broken to see it. But you would have ruined everything." Adrian stood, fists clenched. "You stole my sister." "I saved the company," Leonard roared. "I kept it alive. While you mourned and stumbled, I ran this empire. You think you can just undo 17 years of control with a single reunion?" Adrian stepped closer. "No, I'm not undoing it. I'm exposing it. The board already has the files. By tonight, your access will be revoked. Your accounts are frozen. Your history rewritten. You'll answer for everything." Leonard sneered. "She's just a girl. No one will believe her." Ava finally spoke. "They don't have to believe me. They'll believe the truth. DNA doesn't lie. Leonard's face twisted, but before he could lunge or yell, security appeared at the door. Carson gave a curt nod. "Shall we escort Mr. Vaughn out?" Adrian didn't even look at his uncle. He's no longer family. As they dragged him away, Ava felt her body tremble, not from fear, but from release. The man who had stolen her name, her childhood, her place in the world, was finally gone. Adrian turned to her, eyes full of pain and awe. "You did that." She shook her head, tears slipping silently. "We did." And in the quiet that followed, something shifted, not just power, but legacy. The press conference had been scheduled quietly, yet the room was packed. Cameras buzzed, reporters whispered, and the Vaughn board sat with tense expressions, none knowing exactly why Adrian had summoned them. When he stepped onto the stage, flanked by his security chief and legal counsel, there was no tie, no pomp, only purpose. "Good afternoon," he began. "Today we do not talk about business expansions or quarterly earnings. Today we correct a mistake nearly 2 decades old." Murmurs rose. He continued. 17 years ago, during the tragic fire that took our parents, my younger sister was presumed dead. But she wasn't. She was stolen, hidden, raised under a false name by people paid to erase her existence. Her name is Ava Vaughn, and she is very much alive. Gasps filled the air. Then, from stage left, Ava stepped forward. She wore a sleek navy suit, not expensive, but sharp. Her hair tied back, her face calm, her posture unshakable. She didn't smile, she didn't wave. She simply looked out at the world that once turned away from her and said, "I was told I was nothing, that I was no one. But my blood says otherwise, my name says otherwise, and from today forward, I reclaim both." The reporters exploded with questions. Who raised her? Where had she been? What would her role be now? But Ava didn't answer. She let Adrian step in and declare her full reinstatement as co-heir to the Vaughn legacy, as partner in the foundation their parents had built, and as a woman with final say in what the company stood for next. The board, many of whom had benefited from Leonard's silence, clapped with measured hands. That night, Adrian and Ava sat atop the tower, feet dangling over the ledge behind security glass. "You were incredible," Adrian said. Ava stared at the skyline. "I still don't feel like I belong here." "You don't have to feel it yet," he replied. "Just live it. It'll catch up." She smiled faintly. Then her phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. "You think you're safe now? You've only found the surface. Your parents had enemies, and one of them still breathes." Her breath caught. Adrian noticed the change in her face. "What is it?" She handed him the phone. His jaw tightened. "It's not over," she said. "No," he agreed. "It never was." The twist settled in the room like a slow fog. While Leonard had orchestrated her disappearance, someone else had started the fire. Someone deeper, older, and still in the shadows. Ava looked down at her necklace, then up at her brother. "Then we keep digging." He nodded. "And this time, we dig together." Because her name was no longer hidden. It was carved in glass, in steel, in memory. And the world was finally watching. 2 months later, the Vaughn Foundation announced a new initiative, a program to support foster youth and expose hidden corruption in private guardianship systems. It bore Ava's signature, both in policy and in spirit. Her first act as co-heir wasn't to throw a lavish party or buy a penthouse. It was to visit the dusty streets she once walked delivering groceries, the shelter she'd hidden in after leaving Sharon's house, and the diner where she studied under flickering lights. Reporters begged for sit-downs. Magazines offered cover features. She declined them all. "This isn't about fame," she told Adrian. "It's about fixing what broke me, and so many others." Vaughn Global rebranded under her watch. No longer just a tech giant, but a guardian of justice, legacy, and truth. But Ava wasn't done. The anonymous message she'd received still haunted her. And when her investigators traced it to a private server tied to an offshore account once connected to Vaughn Industries' former security director, who'd mysteriously retired 2 weeks before the fire, her world cracked again. Turns out, Leonard hadn't acted alone. The blaze that took her parents was part of a broader scheme, a failed corporate coup meant to eliminate the Vaughn bloodline entirely. Leonard had taken the opportunity to hide Amelia and steal control. But someone else had lit the match. That man now lived quietly in the Swiss Alps, retired, rebranded, but not unreachable. Adrian wanted legal action. Ava said no. He lives in hiding. That's worse than prison. Let him rot in the shadows. Instead, she focused on light. At the grand opening of the Amelia Grace Vaughn home, a shelter she named after her lost childhood, Ava stood before a crowd of young girls, all wearing donated blazers and tiny heart-shaped lockets. "You may not know where you come from," she told them, "but one day you will define where you're going." One little girl raised her hand. "Are you a princess now?" Ava smiled. "Not a princess, a survivor." The crowd erupted in quiet applause, and Adrian, standing behind her, wiped a tear discreetly. "She's more than that," he whispered to a board member. "She's the storm that came back to build." That evening, Ava returned to the rooftop one last time. The city shimmered. The tower stood tall, not as a monument to power, but to redemption. Adrian joined her, placing a glass of wine beside her. "You've done it," he said. She looked at him. "No, we did it." He smiled. "So what's next?" Ava held up a blank notebook. "I think it's time I start writing my own chapters." And as the wind swept through her hair and the world beneath her buzzed with noise, one thing became clear. She had been born into legacy, stolen into silence, raised in shadow, but she returned as fire, and the world would never forget her name again. They called her Nobody. They erased her name, her birthright, her bloodline. But they forgot one thing. Truth always finds its way home. And when it didn't whisper. It roared. Ava Vaughn didn't just reclaim her name. She rewrote its meaning. Not with revenge, but with grace. Not with cruelty, but with strength. The ones who sold her off? Forgotten. The ones who doubted her? Buried under their own shame. And the ones still stuck judging a woman by her shoes? They'll never see the crown she wears now, because real royalty doesn't walk in with diamonds. She walks in with silence, and leaves with the world watching.